Have you ever thought, man, this is a tough time to be alive. With everything going on, it's easy to feel like we've drawn the short straw. But what if I told you that, compared to some other points in human history, we're actually living in paradise? Today, we'll be going on a wild ride back in time to find out what was truly the worst time to be born in human history. Grab your popcorn, because it's about to get grim, but also fascinating. Let's start our journey not with a bang, but with a volcanic eruption of epic proportions. Imagine you're born in the year 536 AD. The world is suddenly plunged into a mysterious, perpetual twilight. A dense, dry fog rolls in, covering Europe, the Middle East, parts of Asia. The sun becomes a dim, bluish disk in the sky, giving no more light than fading long months. Summer never arrives. Temperatures plummet, causing crops to fail everywhere. It snows in the middle of summer in China. Widespread famine follows. People are starving, desperate. The historian Putin's wrote, where the sun gave forth its light without brightness, light and darkness. What caused this global catastrophe? Scientists believe it was a massive volcanic eruption, perhaps in Iceland or North America, that spewed a gigantic ash cloud into the atmosphere, creating a volcanic winter. But the misery didn't stop there. This period of cold and famine weakened the population, making them vulnerable. Just a few years later, in 541 AD, the first major bubonic plague pandemic, known as the Plague of Justinian, swept through the Roman Empire. It is estimated to have wiped out up to a third of the population in the affected areas. So, you've survived a sunless world and starvation, only to face one of the deadliest plagues in history. Welcome to the 6th century. Definitely a strong contender for the worst time to be born. But maybe you think, okay, that sounds bad. But what about the big one? The Black Death. You're right. We can't have this conversation without visiting the mid-14th century. Let us set the scene. The year is 1347. You're reliving in a bustling medieval European town. Life is already tough. Sanitation is non-existent, medicine is primitive, and the feudal system keeps most people in a state of servitude. Then, rumors start swirling about a terrifying new disease arriving from the east, carried on merchant ships. It starts with fever, chills, and aches. Then come the dreaded buboes. Painful, swollen lymph nodes in the groin, armpits, and neck, which turn black. That's why they called it the Black Death. This plague was relentlessly efficient. It is estimated to have killed between 30% and 60% of Europe's population in just a few years. Think about that. In some towns and cities, more than half the people you knew, your family, your friends, your neighbors, were gone. Society was turned upside down. Fields were left unplowed, businesses shuttered, and the social order collapsed. People were so terrified they abandoned their own sick family members. The sheer psychological terror of living through that, not knowing if you'd be next, is almost unimaginable. If you were born in the 30s, you'd have come of age just in time for the world to literally fall apart around you. Now, let's fast forward a bit. What about a time of constant, brutal warfare? Let's talk about the 30 Years' War, from 1618 to 1648. This wasn't just one war. It was a complex series of conflicts that raged across Central Europe, mainly in what is now Germany. It started as a religious conflict between Protestants and Catholics, but quickly spiraled into a political free-for-all, involving every major European power. What made it so awful for the average person? The armies of the time were largely mercenary forces. They were poorly paid, so they lived off the land. This meant they would march into a village, steal all the food, livestock, and valuables, and often burn the village to the ground. Violence, torture, and brutality were commonplace. On top of the constant threat from soldiers, famine and disease were rampant. The constant movement of armies spread plagues, like typhus and dysentery, everywhere. Historians estimate that the population of the German states dropped by an average of 20 to 40%. In some regions, it was over 60%. For 3 decades, there was no peace, no stability, just a relentless cycle of violence, starvation, and death. Being born in Germany at the start of the 17th century meant your entire life would likely be defined by this horrifying, seemingly endless war. But what if the worst time wasn't about a single event, but about an entire era of human existence? Let's rewind the clock. Way back. Further than Rome, further than the pyramids. Let's go back to around 75,000 years ago. This is prehistory. Humans are hunter-gatherers, living in small, nomadic bands. Life is already a constant struggle for survival. But then, something terrible happens. On the island of Sumatra, a supervolcano called Toba erupts. This wasn't just any eruption. It was the largest explosive eruption in the last 25 million years. It blasted so much ash and sulfur into the atmosphere that it triggered a volcanic winter that may have lasted for a decade. Global temperatures dropped significantly, killing off plants and the animals that depended on them. For the small human population at the time, this was an extinction-level event. Food sources vanished. The world grew cold and dark. According to the Toba catastrophe theory, the human population plummeted to just a few thousand individuals, creating a genetic bottleneck. Imagine being one of maybe 10,000 humans left on the entire planet. Every day is a desperate fight for food in a frozen, barren world. The very survival of our species hung by a thread. Being born into that world means you're born on the absolute brink of human extinction. That is a heavy burden to bear. So, we've looked at the sunless sky of 536, the Black Death of the 14th century, the brutal 30 Years' War, and the prehistoric apocalypse of the Toba eruption. Each one is a nightmare scenario in its own right. But which one was the worst? It's a tough call. The Black Death was psychologically terrifying and killed an insane percentage of the population. The 30 Years' War was 3 decades of non-stop human cruelty. The Toba eruption brought our species to the edge of annihilation. But for my money, the absolute worst time to be born has to be 536 ADY, because it was a triple threat. First, you have the mysterious, terrifying global dimming event. Imagine the psychological impact of the sun disappearing for over a year. Your entire reality is shaken. Then comes the freezing temperatures and crop failures, leading to mass starvation on a global scale. Your body is weakened. You're desperate. And just as you think it can't get any worse, the Justinian plague arrives to finish the job. It's the combination of an environmental catastrophe, a global famine, and a devastating pandemic, all hitting within a few short years. It was a perfect storm of suffering that affected nearly the entire known world at the time. You had nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. It really puts our own problems into perspective, doesn't it? As challenging as our world can sometimes feel, we have science that can explain volcanic eruptions, medicine to fight pandemics, and global networks to transport food. The people living in 536 had none of that. They only had darkness, hunger, and fear. So next time you're having a bad day, who's to remember at least the sun is shining, and you're not living in the year 536. What do you think? Do you agree that 536 was the worst? Or does another period in history get your vote? Let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks so much for watching and for taking this journey through time with me. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history. See you in the next one.